Hello and welcome to part 3 of topic 1, molecular structures. In this topic we're going to focus on the overall macromolecular structure of polymers. So to begin with, let's look at branching. Branching comes in several different categories. For example, low density polyethylene has long branches that are widely spaced out. This results in a low packing efficiency because the long branches prevent the branches from organizing into crystals. Very low density polyethylene has 10 to 35 short branches per 1,000 carbon atoms. In other words, many small short branches occur along the chain. This also results in a relatively low packing density. More efficient is the high density polyethylene, which has 5 to 10 short branches per 1,000 carbon atoms. So here you have few branches that are very short, thus allowing the molecule to form and organize into a crystal structure. We also have to talk about molecular conformation, and this is the idea of how the molecule tangles up and wraps around itself. Recall that carbon-carbon covalent bonds have bond directionality, and they also have the ability to rotate about their axis. Therefore, they tend to form twisted shapes rather than straight lines, particularly over many atoms of rotation. The result is a molecular conformation is a function of the lowest energy state for each bond rotation. In other words, the polymer molecule will organize into the lowest possible energy state, which is usually a twisted and contorted ball of chain, all coiled up. Stereoregularity is another issue we have to talk about when talking about molecular structure. It has to do with how side groups come off the chain and whether they're found on the same side of the chain, opposite sides, or randomly. So isotactic polymers have all the side groups on one side of the chain. When it's syndiotactic, the side groups alternate between the two sides, and atactic indicates that they're randomly distributed amongst the two sides. Isotactic polymers can be crystalline because of the regularity of the structure. Atactic cannot be crystalline because it's so irregular and random. Syndiotactic is typically semi-crystalline. It has some ability to form a crystal structure, but has some difficulty as well, so you'll get some areas that are crystalline and some areas that are simply amorphous. Then there's the issue of what are called geometric isomers. And geometric isomers have to do with which side of the molecule the side group happens to be on. So for example, imagine a polyisoprene molecule where you have a methyl group sticking off the side. In this case, the CH3 and the hydrogen side group are on the same side of the double bond. That indicates that it would be a cis polyisoprene molecule. Cis is the Latin word for same. If the hydrogen and the CH3 molecule are on opposite sides of the double bond, then it's a trans polyisoprene molecule, or opposite sides. Trans is Latin. Copolymerization is another thing we can do, where you take two or more mers of different types and merge them together into the same polymer. There's different ways you can do this. So for example, you could start out with a homopolymer of polystyrene where each of these orange balls represents a mer of polystyrene. You could have an alternating copolymer where you would have a styrene acrylonitrile molecule. So you have a styrene next to an acrylonitrile, next to styrene, next to acrylonitrile. You can have a graft copolymer where you have a styrene molecule with another another chain of mers coming off the side. That would be a grafted branch. You could have a graft terpolymer, which is what ABS, or acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, is. In this case, you have styrene and acrylonitrile alternating, as with SAN, but you also have the short chain of butadiene coming off the side. Or you could have a random copolymer with butadiene coming off in the chain, and then styrene mers, and then butadiene, styrene, and so on. So the bottom line is that we can take the mers and merge them together into a polymer in many different ways in order to get different polymer properties. Cross-linking is another thing we could try to do, and cross-linking is really just a special case of branching, where a single molecular tree that is infinitely long but contains no closed rings would be a gel. So imagine if you had lots of branches but never actually had any crosslinks. That results in a gel. If you have large molecular trees that contain a low density number of crosslinks, then you get a rubber. And if you have a 3D network of polymers with a high density of crosslinks, that's an epoxy. And you can see how as the number of crosslinks increases from 0 crosslinks with the gel to a low number with rubber and a high number with epoxy, the higher the number of crosslinks, the greater the rigidity of the polymer. Rubbers are a special group of materials. They have what's called a high storage modulus, which allows them to store a lot of energy through bond rotation and kinking of the polymer. Now the question, of course, is what's required of the molecules in order to do this? Well, first of all, the molecular chains have to be very large. They have to be very long in order to have lots of contortion and twisting. There can be no aromatic rings in the chain because aromatic rings tend to prevent rotation of the bonds, and this would make it difficult for the polymer to be flexible. There can be no polar side groups because polar side groups would induce stronger van der Waals bonds and again prevent rotation. And lastly, you need a large network chain molecular weight. And what this means is that you have a large number of crosslinks relative to the total size of the molecule. This ends our discussion of topic 1 on molecular structures.